Please make yourselves comfortable. We have an incredible session coming up now. I'm incredibly proud to introduce our next speaker. Some of our seats there are empty. I think we've left those for some toxic managers who may show up, who may decide to have a little group of themselves. Look, this is going to be an incredible session. Our next speaker is going to be talking about the crucible of leadership, lessons you can apply. Our next speaker is former Army Commander, Lieutenant General Raj Shukla. With over 40 years of service to the Indian Army, Lieutenant General Shukla has made huge contributions to India's military strategic future. In recognition of his service to the most exceptional order, he was awarded the Param Vashish Seva in 2021. He's a distinguished fellow of the Center for Land Warfare Studies, a combat aviator, public speaker, author, and he's spoken at over 400 seminars and events globally. In 2022, the Honorable President of India appointed Lieutenant General Shukla to the UPSC. Ladies and gentlemen, it wouldn't behoove me to say, I think this man deserves a standing ovation. Please welcome on stage a great hero to the nation, Lieutenant General Shukla.
Thanks a lot. Thank you. So I'm here not to speak about my leadership journey, but I'm going to speak to you today about your futures, our futures, India's rise, India's national security futures. So friends, ladies and gentlemen, Jai Hind, Namaskar, good afternoon. A great pleasure and a singular honor to be here in your midst. Thank you very much, the Great Managers Institute, for both the opportunity and the invite. Now, the recent turn of events, Pahalgam and Ops Sindoor, should remind us that you, me, the corporates that you represent, India's economic enterprise, the strategic military system, our wider polity and the Indian state, we are all faced with a rather grim set of national security challenges. That may be bad news, but that's the reality. Unless we put our heads together, and particularly the private sector startups, and brace up to meet the larger challenges to our economic heft, security, and strategic poise, our forays in the equally critical spheres of business, commerce, economic, and other sociological domains may be at risk. Our economic flight must be calibrated carefully with the span of our strategic stride. As the Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi never fails to remind us, he says, Shanti ki chaah aur Shakti ki raah bhin nahi hai. The desire for peace and the path to power are synonymous. Successful managers of tomorrow will of course be the ones that are masters of their primary wares, but more likely those that have a wide-angled view of the world, a broader, deeper understanding of the finer nuanced statecraft at play. That's my theme for today. In our conversation, therefore, we will focus on the nature and import of these larger, wider challenges. A hierarchy of concerns, so to speak, that lie at the intersect of a very consequential and powerful triad of geopolitics, of technologies, and national security. In the light of these challenges, the question before all of us is, what is the leadership ecosystem of thought, conception, and delivery that India needs to create, build, and nurture, to fuel, drive, and secure India's rise? That is something I will try and address. It's not going to be easy, but I think that is the reality that India faces. It is a rise which will be characterized not only by some very intense strategic, military, economic, technological competition, but also one that will be contested vigorously, even violently, as Ops Sindoor just demonstrated. Till not very long ago, ladies and gentlemen, India's grand strategy was predicated on the premise objective of securing our external frontiers and creating a benign internal environment in order that we could laser focus on the growth, development, and prosperity of our 143 crore citizenry. Made sense, eminent sense. That, however, does not seem to be happening. India will have to show the resilience, dexterity, and resolve to plot its rise through multiple confrontations, crisis, even conflicts. So leadership in a turbulent world, is what we shall try and explore in terms of 3 critical metrics and 4 pathways in which all of you have a huge stake, direct or indirect. The 3 metrics that should concern us, one is a very visible swivel in geopolitics from economics to hard power and national security. It's a very visible swivel. 2, a technological tsunami, and may I underline that word, tsunami that is sweeping the globe. And 3, the reality of a very challenging neighborhood security environment that stares us in the face, one that India will have to navigate very astutely. And to grapple with these metrics, I propose 4 pathways. 1, create deterrence in order that we do not have to war fight. So I'm not warmongering here. I'm arguing for the creation of technologically enabled, sophisticated deterrence. And it is very critical to understand, appreciate this. Deterrence and not war fighting is what I advocate. 2, there are some very fine minds here, but I would urge you to revisit the fundamental attributes of our economic statecraft. We must simply find the money that we need to spend on defense. It will be thoroughly unwise not to do so. And 3, what we need most, in my view, is a technological renaissance, not baby steps here and there, but a technological renaissance, especially in deep technologies. And 4, we must invest in innovation, research and development, and civil-military fusion to ramp up our competitiveness, productivity, outcomes, and delivery by an order of magnitude. And allow me to elaborate on each of these ever so briefly. The metrics first, the geopolitical swivel. In the 1990s, US President Bill Clinton famously observed, and we've all heard it, he said it was the economy stupid, implying thereby that at the end of the day, the only thing that really mattered was the economy. He was not wrong, but he was not wrong then. It would seem to me, however, that on account of a major swivel in global geopolitics since, today it is national security stupid. Look at the missiles and drones flying over the skies in Europe, West Asia, and prospectively in Taiwan. Europe never thought they'll fight a war. Russia, a mere $2 trillion economy, $2 trillion, is prevailing in the Ukrainian theater of war over the combined West, an aggregate $41 trillion economy on account of superior leveraging of hard power. 2 versus 41. For more than a year, despite being subjected to heavy aerial maritime strikes by Israel and even the mighty United States of America, the Houthis continue to commander global shipping through the Red Sea. So chiseled capacities in defense and national security are extremely salient for comprehensive national power and strategic heft. Defense expenditures are being ramped up sharply, not only in Europe and Indo-Pacific, but across the globe. We need to take note. So that was about, the swivel in geopolitics, the technological tsunami. As an accompaniment to the geopolitical swivel, the world is also being swept by a technological tsunami. We seem to be at this unique moment in history when technologies are driving national security and geopolitics like never before. Never before. Let's take artificial intelligence. Experts posit that the economies of the lead nations of the Industrial Revolution grew by as much as 10%. 10%. Now, the phenomenon of artificial intelligence, by all accounts, will be even more transformative than the Industrial Revolution. The benefactors, therefore, logically, will grow by more than 10%, perhaps creating in the process a new set of strategic haves and have-nots in the international system. That's artificial intelligence, and that's the choice for India. Haves or have-nots. Look at the Chinese DeepSeek. Of the 211-odd engineers associated with the creation, as many as 70% are not American returnees. They have not left the shores of China. The best and the brightest in AI in China are now homegrown. It was sheer talent that drove the algorithmic innovation that has produced a model that rivals the American ChatGPT at 1/20th of cost and on older rationed GPUs. That should worry us. What should worry us is that 40 of these engineers are directly associated with the PLA. That comes from their concept of civil-military fusion. What should worry us even more is the fact that while DeepSeek is focusing on pure research in AI, it is being complemented by an equally advanced commercial business model in AI, QN, pioneered by nobody else but the legendary Jack Ma. And it is this redoubtable research, business, commerce combo that is pushing the AI paradigm in China to a new pioneering high. China has 238 large language models operating in diverse domains. We barely have one. So whichever LLM model India's Risham decides to emulate, the frugal French Mistral or the more innovative DeepSeek, we need to get onto the AI bandwagon and run fast and furious without getting bogged down by the regulation debates. Quantum, in a similar manner, is pregnant with astounding capacities in computing power. Sorry, just 1 minute. If you take Majorana 1, Microsoft's quantum bit, and place it in the center of your palm, and I'm not saying it, Satya Nadella said it, so it must be true. He says if you place it in the center of your palm, you will have more computing power in your palm than all the world's computers put together. Quantum is also poised to breach all manners of existing encryption codes. While with existing capacities in quantum, commercial banking encryption is already at risk. Military encryption, to include nuclear codes, are also under threat. Little wonder then that last year, a CIA report labeled quantum as a bigger or a big enough threat as the Chinese People's Liberation Army. So this is the technological tsunami. India's strategic environment. A peek into India's strategic threat environment may also be pertinent, especially in Bombay. Along our western borders, there is Pakistan, actively aided and abetted by a very powerful China, and a drone superpower Turkey is also the ever-lingering specter of terror. So that's one reality. To our north, there is China, with whom the challenge is twofold. A military which has undergone the most massive military modernization in the history of mankind. This needs to be understood, history of mankind. And a techno-strategic military lag that continues to grow. The military component of the power differential with China, just the military component, is $450 billion annually. That must sink in. There are limits to valor. We need the money, $450 billion. To our east, and there's no time to elaborate, but let me just say, Bangladesh is fast emerging as a new national security reality. Lal Monirhat Air Base, Yunus suddenly discovering the landlockedness of our northeast states. While in the Indian Ocean, we are faced with the maritime prowess of a 400-ship Chinese navy, the world's largest. The threat spectrum is wide and the challenge is grave. It is not adequately appreciated, but the only other country, in my view, that faces a similar threat calculus in gravity and scale may be Israel. No other. So what must we do? Here is my to-do list, the 4 suggested pathways for your very kind consideration. Pathway 1, build deterrence. So, the less than productive strategic restraint of yesteryears, particularly against acts of terror. I refer to the politico-military inaction post the Parliament attack in December 2001. Some of you might recollect. The Parliament was hit. We did nothing. When we were mobilized for war, the military garrison in Kaluchak was hit. 34 sleeping soldiers, women and children were killed. May 2002, we do nothing. Even in the aftermath of the gruesome terror attacks in Bombay in 2008, 26/11, we did precious little. That strategic restraint, in my view, has thankfully given way in Op Sindoor to a new calibrated offensive poise. Let me recall the despondent mood of those times to put the newfound offensive poise in perspective. Sometime around that time, one political luminary, Arun Shore, said, or he reflected the collective anguish and the despair of those times when he said, not an eye for an eye, not a tooth for a tooth. For one eye, both the eyes. For a tooth, the whole jaw. This was Arun Shore reflecting the anguish, the despair of those times. Another leading figure mocked the instrument of force. He was speaking about our Air Force. He said, आपकी जो Air Force है, ये ग्वालियर से टेक ऑफ करती है और बिना दुश्मन पर हमला किए जू करके अंबाला में लैंड कर जाती है. He was mocking the instrument of force. Super Cop KPS Gill, who led the counter-terror campaign in Punjab, offered some very sane advice. You will not win the war on terror, he said, merely by chasing terrorists. We were chasing terrorists for 3 decades in Kashmir. You will win it by overwhelming the adversary. So Op Sindoor has converted the mood, despair, frustration, even wisdom of those times into a new strategic reality. Through Op Sindoor, India has also called Pakistan's schoolboy nuclear bluff. This strange piece of nuclear theology, whereby under a nuclear cover, it was allowed to go on a terror rampage. It was allowed to go on a terror rampage by much of the Western world. Strange piece of nuclear theology. And most significantly, in my view, Op Sindoor has rediscovered the utility of force. Acharya Chanakya warned many years ago. He said, अगर शास्त्र को भूलोगे तो अपनी संस्कृति खो दोगे. पर अगर शस्त्र का त्याग करोगे, instrument of force in your strategic calculus, तो राष्ट्र ही खो दोगे. Op Sindoor शस्त्र सैन्य सामर्थ्य के उपयोगी प्रयोग का एक उल्लेखनीय उदाहरण है. The utility of force. So from strategic restraint to offensive poise. But we must now look at the greater challenges that lie ahead and invest thoughtfully but resolutely in deterrence. Not merely for episodic wins to get over one crisis or another, not from Sindoor to another Sindoor, but in order to root Indian power in deeper, technologically enabled, chiseled, enduring, sophisticated military capacities. That is something wise nations do. That is something India must. So the next time we have such a challenge, our penetrating capacities in intelligence, space, edge AI, and precision targeting must be of such an order that we take out not the brothers-in-law of Masood Azhar, but Masood Azhar himself. Like USA takes out Soleimani and USA takes out al-Zawahiri. That will be a powerful, restrained India, and that message will go out to the world. Corporates too, though you live in another world, may I suggest to you, need to pay greater attention to the domain of geopolitical risk assessment, mitigation, impact on supply chains and businesses et al. When I travel abroad, most Western corporates spend a lot of time and money on this. We don't do it in India. And anyway, that's just a suggestion. You may find the exercise extremely useful. We need to revisit the metrics of our economic statecraft. Some of our economists have got lazy. Given our very adverse threat environment, we need to, as I said, revisit the metrics of our defense spending. Our very gifted economists will have to find the ways, means, and more importantly, the money that we need for deterrence. May I also say that this guns versus growth is a childish, puerile argument. Spending on desi defense technology, in fact, boosts the economy. Look at the way America has launched its their AD system, Golden Dome or something they called it. It's going to get jobs in every state of the United States of America. So we need to not just increase defense spending, but revisit the metrics of our economic statecraft. The basis on which you decide to spend. Defense provides jobs, as I said. It fetches revenues for the state and boosts exports. It is not wasteful. It contributes to the economy. In fact, in a recent paper in the American Economic Review, it was argued that military spending has a fiscal multiplier of nearly 2, which means that a rupee spent on military spending sensibly creates an additional GDP of another rupee. That's the economic argument. More importantly, the additional rupee comes with enhanced productivity that endures. So defense spending helps to prime the economy. We must invest more, therefore, in defense and deterrence. May I also say this? Deterrence is, of course, costly, but wars are costlier. Don't believe me? Ask the Ukrainians. Technological renaissance. The private sector, the startup enterprise, the scientific ecosystem, and wider government need to get far more ambitious about emerging critical deep technologies in speed and scale. While some baby steps have been taken, as I said, here and there, what we need is a veritable technological renaissance if India is to get to the next level of economic productivity and strategic poise. Of what kind, you may ask? In what manner? This piece of data may be useful. In the years 2003 to 2007, across the gamut of emerging critical technologies, AI, quantum, robotics, biotech, and the like, the world's sole superpower, the United States of America, led in 60 out of 65 technologies. 60 out of 65. Then China launches its 1,000 talents plan, develops a diaspora strategy, and today China leads in 57 out of 65. 57 out of 65. What a dramatic inversion in technology leadership. The good news is that in at least some 10 of these subsets, and I'm quoting from the ASPE Critical Technology Tracker, in at least 10 of these subsets, India is not too far behind. In fact, it's a distant third but a distant third. So could we not pick these 10 subsets and through laser-focused resolve, in 10 years, emerge as the world's leader in at least 10 emerging technologies, laying in the process the edifice for a larger technological renaissance? Because in my view, that is what we need. The private sector and the startup system have an equal stake in the development of these critical emerging technologies, because all of them, without exception, lie at the cusp of civil-military fusion. What works in the civil space works in the military space. And as I said before, we need to act fast, else our very technological sovereignty may be at risk. Strategic haves and strategic have-nots. Pathway 4, innovation, R&D, and civil-military fusion. The high ground of strategic futures is technological innovation. In Ukraine, the best performers are not government behemoths like NASA, nor traditional defense primes like Boeing or Lockheed, but agile, fleet-footed, innovative startups like Starlink, Palantir, and Anduril. That is the reality. National security today, too, is not only about generals, it's about high-grade talent, the kind that Alex Karp, Elon Musk, and Palmer Luckey bring to the warfighting space. So that's the reality. The military needs you, your skills, your bandwidth. Ukraine, a country, and this is incredible if you've not already heard it, Ukraine, a country without a navy, yes, without a navy, has used crew drones and Elon Musk Starlinks to knock out Russia's iconic, formidable Black Sea fleet out of the naval base in Sevastopol. Technological innovation, startup, and a mighty navy. Palantir's AI-enabled data services have hastened military decision-making, reduced target engagement cycles. Artillery shoots, which once took as long as 30 minutes, are now concluded with surgical precision in less than 5. And they have also helped to develop the art and science of dronery, a glimpse of which you got in Op Sindoor, But next time, these long-range drones might strike Mumbai, the ones coming from China. These are not Pakistani drones which will peter out at Amritsar. So drones penetrate trenches today. They get through tank turrets and are also used as strategic air power to degrade adversary energy and infrastructural grids. Quite unsurprisingly, 80% of Russian casualties in men and equipment have been caused not by adversary artillery, not by armor, not by air power, but by $100 Ukrainian drones and the skillful marriage of microelectronics and explosives. So this is what technological innovation is doing, not just the science, but the innovation and the entrepreneurship behind it. India's strategic military sector, too, needs its own Silicon Valley, a zone that bustles with energy enterprise and cradles of defense innovation. That's the designated defense corridors around Lucknow and Chennai are being dotted more by traditional defense public sector units, PSUs as we call them, and that the footprint of the private sector and startups is not sufficiently large is not a good omen. This trend needs to be corrected urgently and surgically, especially if we have to win the fight with China. We also need to step up our game in technological innovation, as I said, in terms of speed, scale, and ambition, research and development. The United States of America spends $950 billion annually on R&D in science, of which a whopping $700 billion comes from the private sector. $700 billion from the private sector. The Indian private sector, I can only plead, may like to take some inspiration. China spends $550 billion annually on R&D in science. No wonder Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, recently described Chinese researchers in AI as world-class, even better than the United States of America. R&D and the results. India's spend on R&D is a woeful $40 billion. 40. 950, 550, 40, with the contributions of the private sector being abysmally meager. The moot point is not why is our spend on R&D so low. The real question is as to why neither the Indian government nor the private sector see obvious value in R&D. And inadequacies in R&D, may I posit, will translate directly into feeble strategic military futures. Civil military fusion, and that's the last point. Allow me to advocate the cause of civil military fusion, a concept which originated, unfortunately, once again in China and is driven personally by President Xi himself. Why build walls of granite between civil and military cylinders of excellence? He asked once quite commonsensically. Why build walls? CMF has been used by the Chinese very craftily for more efficient delivery and to prevail in the strategic military competition. To upturn with great guile, specifically, the obsession of Western democracies, including India, with the concept of dual use. Protocols that prevent civilian technologies from being leveraged for military use. So while we are stuck in dual use, they practice civil military fusion. Consequently, China's prowess in shipbuilding has powered both global commerce and a global navy, as also its proficiency in chips are driven by the secret sauce of civil military fusion. It is also being used to pilot the growth of AI in China. The Chinese argue that controls in the civilian domain of AI need to be overwhelming, perhaps to enable state surveillance of its citizenry. But they are categorical that in the strategic military domain of AI, for reasons of national security, the approach will be freewheeling, precisely the opposite of what we are likely to do, thus allowing strategic military applications in AI to progress with abandon. Dr. Sethuraman Panchanathan, and he's an Indian American, so he's an American, the director of the US National Science Foundation. He's a scientist, not a military man, you may like to note, has this to say. He says, we, that is the National Science Foundation, are the offensive arm of Pentagon. Pentagon is the United States military department. We are the offensive arm of Pentagon. Without us, Pentagon is mere defense. In a similar vein, we in India too need to collapse all silos. Civil, military, government, private sector, academia, the corporates and the startup ecosystem. Nothing is doing greater damage to us than all these silos, these cocoons that we live in, especially if we are to brace up to the larger strategic military competition. Talents and attributes from diverse domains, civil, military, private sector, government, academia, the corporates, need to come together and fuse in pursuit of our national security endeavors. Cross-pollination of ministries and structures will have to be the new norm. We need to embrace the concept of national champions in defense with a strategic focus, like much of the world does. So what do? Defense provides budding startups with initial orders. It holds them, it hands-holds them. It holds their hand till commercial viability. Look how smart. The particularly talented startups are propped up even further to destroy adversary competition. It's not stuck in this L1 nonsense. So I hold your hand if I have to defeat an American company. It's strategic. So a lot of strategic hand-holding till the startups are thrown into the brutal global markets. And those identified as national champions continue to be assisted for life, forever, in the resolute pursuit of national interest. I mean, that's what Korea, USA, China, everybody seems to be doing. So the convergence of Saraswati, Lakshmi, and Durga, this is for the Indian audience. Saraswati, Lakshmi, or Durga ka Mishran is what we must pursue and embrace. Create these centers of excellence in our universities, academia, Saraswati, which in turn produce the talent and technologies that we need to create wealth, Lakshmi, and use some of that Lakshmi to nurse the instruments of force, Durga. Civil-military fusion, redux. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, may I say this. As the world's fourth largest economy, soon to be the third largest, the Lowy Asian Power Index ranks us as the third most powerful country in the world. India is now a formidable middle power. An aspiring Vishwabandhu navigating its own rise through some complex power play between a contested hegemon, the USA, and a rising challenger, China. We need to be extremely watchful, agile, and competent. Geopolitics is extremely brutal with those who are neither watchful, nor agile, nor incompetent, or competent. That's the lesson of history. Now that we are entering the big league, we will also have to step up our game in national security and strategic economic technological competition in terms of taking a long view, in terms of sophistry, and in terms of deliverance. India needs a new playbook. While Vasudev Kutumbakam, one earth, one family, one future is a wonderful idea, we must be equally cognizant of the other reality that Swami Vivekananda reminded us of. The world was a gymnasium, he said, where nations come to make themselves strong. So in the global akhada, strength matters. Power is salient. And in the crafting of such power, in the creation of a Sudrir and Surakshit Bharat, India's managerial corporate class, you will play a central part. At a critical moment in its economic rise, strategic evolution, the nation, as I said right in the beginning, needs your skills, your talent, your capacities, and bandwidth like never before. To rephrase an old cliche, you may not be interested in geopolitics, but geopolitics and national security are interested in you. In consequence, war rooms and boardrooms must come together and operate at least in close concert, if not delightful synchrony. Thank you, and Jai Hind.